All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind. But we're going to have a show.
And hello, also. Thank you. I am warmed by your recorded applause. It really does kind of round off what has been an exciting 24 hours, hasn't it, Albert? How did you spend this, what is it, Liberty Day or Liberation Day or, it's kind of new, so we haven't really developed a lot of family traditions around Liberation Day yet. Wife and kids want to go to Disneyland every Liberation Day, but I kind of feel like, I'd like to stay a little closer to home on Liberation Day and kind of watch the stock market tank if I can. I mean, but you can see where do you go distraction, full-blown distraction, go to the movies, ignore it, or do you lean into it and just watch this guy who is clearly an abject moron tank an American economy that was the leading economy in the world when he took office? I mean, these are the tough questions that you deal with on Liberation Day, but I hope you feel liberated. We will share some information. Everything is, shall we say, going as expected, which ain't so great, but there is some stuff happening. I'm anxious to, there he is, my Lord and Savior, Donald J. Trump, with the reciprocal tariff chart. I will share with you one of the bizarre, I'm laughing because it's so stupid. I mean, he's so surrounded by enablers that none of them pushed back on this insane notion about tariffs and a trade deficit being computed the way it was. So if you put that back up, my Lord and Savior, Donald Trump, showing you the trade deficits, the way he's computed them, or someone else has computed them, is not just with a trade deficit, but the notion that because there's a trade deficit, America's getting screwed. And the idea that Vietnam, for example, where we get a ton of stuff because of the low cost of labor. Remember, Vietnam, really they were the beneficiaries of the fact that we are on an adversarial footing with China. So Vietnam, and we still get a lot of stuff from China too, obviously, as noted by Donald Trump yesterday. You see it. They're top of the list, top of the leaderboard. And
this is Casey Kasem in Hollywood.
That's right. Top of the leaderboard for another week this week on the survey. China will be hitting them hard, along with the European Union. And look at Vietnam. So Vietnam, he is showcasing Vietnam as a trade deficit that we have, but we benefit from that trade deficit. And of course, there's going to be a trade deficit because Vietnam produces all of this stuff that we, a consumer economy, consume and buy. And Vietnam is a fraction of the size of the American economy. How could there possibly be anything but a trade deficit? They can't possibly buy enough from America to offset what they're selling us. There isn't the buying power in Vietnam. They are a huge supplier, as is China and much of Asia, because of the low cost of labor. Mexico falls into the same category. So
why are you yelling?
All right. So anyway, we'll get to this. His Rose Garden explanation, or the way he laid it out, it's utterly, it's inexplicable. I mean, apart from sort of the mad king who just wants control of stuff and wants, and this is perhaps a legitimate take on it. I mean, it's not a legitimate take that's going to help any American or the American economy, but it will serve Donald Trump because he wants to be the big guy. He wants to be the mobster who people need to come to him, leaders of major nations on earth, and say, hey, we need to make a deal. We can't do this. Can you do something for us, Mr. President? Is there a way that we can? So now he has the nations of the world in that position, in his mind. That's why he's taken this extremely aggressive stance, I think, in a number of different ways. So on this Liberation Day, this would be post-Liberation Day. That's what Albert, this would be considered post-Liberation Day.
Yeah, that was we were liberated yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday. Thank you. Yes, yeah, and right. We were liberated yesterday, and today we are. It's post-liberation. It's kind of the hangover after the celebration. I went with the lighter jacket for the post-liberation day. I know I typically go dark, but I've gone, and Mimi Gill has noticed it. You're looking quite dapper today on Liberation Day. Thank you. Still have the credibility glasses firmly in place for what will be a rocky ride. And Surf and Tumbleweed with a $13 super chat. How about that? A big shout out to you and a big thanks.
Big shout out.
Damn, son, looking sharp today, says Surf and Tumbleweed. Thank you. I dress up for Liberation Day and the day after. I suggest a libation for Liberation Day time, says Katie Lynch. It will be a festival of libations, I suspect. If you want any kind of solace, I don't think you'll get it from looking at anything in the market. So let me tell you exactly what's happening, precisely what's happening. And what does Mr. Predicto think about Liberation Day? Oh, that's a very good question. That from shadow producer Calvin Wong.
Maybe like, what's the fallout from this? Mr. Predicto could tell us what's going on.
No, that's interesting. I wonder what Mr. Predicto. I need a question that. Let's see. Let me see. Mr. Predicto, will Donald Trump change his mind on the U.S. economy and on the tariffs?
It is best not to say now.
It's best not to say now. Is that what he said, Albert?
Yeah,
It's
concerning.
That is concerning. It doesn't bode well. Even Mr. Predicto is a little anxious. That's Kim is not here today. She is with her
Kim, how are you?
Kids drawing a Snoopy cartoon. She sent me a couple of them, and so she is doing well. But she won't be with us. So it'll just be Albert and myself.
Albert, thank you.
But I do have an update, and I do want to mention what's coming up on the show. Bottom of the hour, a controversial and high-profile podcast is making some news. It has to do with World War II, the Nazis, and weapons of war, and a family that discovered that their father was involved in this endeavor. And we'll talk to Suzanne Rico, bottom of the hour, about that. Then, top of the next hour, second hour, David Katz, the former federal prosecutor, now defense lawyer, will take us through the many legal processes that are going on right now around executive orders from the president and the follow-up on the Venezuelan situation, which is bizarre, isn't it? That you can deport all of these people without due process. Again, many of them may be gang members and, real toxic influences on the world around them, so you want them out. But some of them may not be. Some of them may be just people who were scooped up in it all. And it appears that at least 3 of them fall into that category. And now we're hearing from the administration there's no way to bring them back. Really? No way to bring them back. No way. You guys haven't even called on getting that makeup artist back, or that father of the autistic child who's 5 years old, getting that guy back. No history of a criminal record in this country at all. I think one of them's been here 30 years. I mean, it's an abomination. And the fact that they won't pick up the phone and ask for these prisoners to be released and sent back to America, it's grotesque. And last thing I'll just say about this is, what is this? What a BS story. The one thing I will say about this administration is They have some of the thinnest, stinkiest BS stories about why they can't do something or why they have to do something. And the stinky BS story about this is, well, they're in El Salvador. We have no control over them anymore. So we'd like to get this guy back. Yeah, it was an administrative error, but we can't get him back because it's El Salvador now. Really? You're telling me if you picked up the phone to El Salvador, they're going to give you grief about returning one of these guys or two of these guys or three of these guys? I don't buy that. You have them completely in the palm of your hand. That's the whole reason they're taking these guys to begin with. So it's just a BS story. They just don't care. They don't care because they're Latino. They don't care because sadly, I think it's because they're Latino. I just think that's what it is. Why? Because that guy's Latino. You don't want to pick up the phone and get him back, even though it was your administrative error. And now he's living in a hellish horror show in El Salvador while his autistic son and wife live back here in America. And I'm sure they'll be next. I'm sure they're going to scoop them up and send them out as well. Anyway, that's all stuff we can talk about with David Katz. But anyway, one thing that's important on this show, and it never changes, and it comes this time of year as
The Mark Thompson Show.
I really want to get an update, Albert, if I could, on Mark's Madness. Mark's Madness is the event that we're in the Sweet 16 now.
Mark's Madness.
Yeah, but I want to get the update from the commissioner's office. Albert, we had a couple of pretty big showdowns yesterday, and what happened, please?
Well, yeah,
Albert's
we had a
getting the
couple
screen up
one-sided.
for you now.
Yeah, no, we had a couple one-sided votes for a favorite. AOC baby girl took it overwhelmingly yesterday, as well as Fauci don't know also took it quite easily. So
it was almost a walkover.
Oh, girl, baby girl, don't
Yeah,
even play.
that took out Larry King pretty quickly.
What can you tell us about the scene?
Larry, you're done. That's what I can tell you. And then Trump's concepts went down to Fauci. You do not know what you're talking about.
You do not know
what you're talking
what you
about.
are talking
Right.
about.
Anyway.
it's sad because one of his concepts were Liberation Day. And
His
on
concepts
Liberation
live
Day,
on, but his drop goes away. Yes, exactly. All right, well, without any further delay, we do have it underway for yet another day, the Sweet 16.
Now, Mark's Madness.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
You are going to vote, even if you have never voted before or don't have a bracket. You'll vote for either...
Put that coffee down.
Oh, put the coffee down, or...
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
Again, you'll vote for either...
Put that coffee down.
Or...
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
You'll vote for either of them in the post section of our YouTube channel until midnight tonight. The coffee down, going back to Texas showdown, which is, as I say, leading off today's Sweet 16, is a dead heat so far. Now, admittedly, there only been a handful of votes, but what's that?
The voting just started, but I'm really pulling. I have going back to Texas winning it all. I think I'm the only one out of all the brackets.
I think going back to Texas is a great drop, but put the coffee down is a great drop. I don't know. Well, you vote for...
Put that coffee down.
There's something about that I really like, but the going back to Texas is...
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
Yeah. Anyway, you vote in our YouTube channel. We do this every March while March Madness goes on with basketball. Mark's Madness, we just play our drops off against each other in the show, and you vote again in our YouTube channel. If you're subscribed to our channel, which I hope you are or you will be, it'll just show up in your feed. But if you're not, you can still vote, and you just go to our channel and you go to the post section, and that's where you'll see the showdowns of the day, and you can influence the outcome. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I asked Albert to pull together some of the stuff from this bizarre Donald Trump tariff announcement and the trading on the stock market, which is... I think the worldwide markets are a general reflection of what's happening. I mean, I get that sort of much used excuse, which is, hey, the market isn't the whole economy. And yeah, but when there are dramatic sell-offs in the market and constrictions in the market worldwide, you can tell some stuff based on that. And so as the Dow continues to drop like a stone, it's down over 1,200 points, I think, before we started the show. That's where it was. And, you're looking at a double-digit tariff hike across the board worldwide. This is going to send world markets into a tailspin. Economists are calling it moronic. They're calling it ill-advised, to be polite. But here's a little bit of what we, again, went around the horn and we caught up with, and we'll start and stop and some commentary along the way. Go ahead, Albert, please.
Let's bring in chief economist at Moody's, Mark Zandi. Mark, what's your first impression of the scale of this tariff announcement, and what's your reaction to now what we're seeing with the markets down? I'm looking right now in real time, 3.6% is how far the Dow has cratered at this point.
My reaction, ugh. I mean, really? The damage this is doing is, clearly evident, and it's just going to continue to mount. I mean, if these tariffs are fully implemented and implemented quickly, it's going to push the U.S. economy, the global economy, into recession. I just don't see any other way around it. I mean, this is a massive tax increase on American consumers and businesses, and it's just going to be impossible for us to digest this without doing tremendous damage. And there's all kinds of longer-term implications that are all very negative. I just, I'm so perplexed by this, and you can see it. I mean, what's going on in the stock market today, I think, is just the beginning. Unless, folks listen and start to pivot here and take some of this back, because this is going to do a tremendous amount of damage.
I mean, we're talking
okay,
a
Albert,
baseline
thank you. That's
tariff.
good. I mean, the pivot that he's talking about, you just won't have. This isn't a guy in Trump who really can execute a pivot like that. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. And as I say, these self-enrichment opportunities for Trump and his billionaire boys club of cabinet officials and others who operate around him, it's there in a big, big way. I mean, there is self-enrichment opportunity if you're the president. And again, if you're operating kind of as the mobster in chief, where he's able to just with utter fiat do this stuff. These tariffs, he didn't even have the typical pre-tariff negotiation that is associated typically with some kind of changing economic policy and any kind of trade policy. They're usually they're diplomatic meetings. There are things that are done typically. I mean, and they're done typically not because, oh, Mark, that's old school government. This is the new school government. He just comes in and he just does what he wants to do, man. Yeah. But just because it's old school doesn't mean it's bad school. These things, if you're really serious about a trade agreement, have to be navigated and negotiated ahead of time. Now, clearly, he's not about that. He is about the mobster in chief. And he just wants to, with utter, as I say, a knee-jerk compulsion, he wants to execute these tariffs. And so my point is, and where I started this, I think it was hard for his people to even cobble together an explanation as to how these tariffs pencil out, because they don't pencil out. What else do you have, Albert?
Jeffrey's team in Asia calls, quote, a nightmare come true for textile and footwear manufacturers. So many brands and retailers have shifted manufacturing out of China over the last number of years to Vietnam and other Asian production Asian countries. And now those are subject to heavy reciprocal tariffs. What we learned yesterday, Vietnam imports subject to 46%, Cambodia 49%, and China, as we've mentioned, now subject to a 34% reciprocal tariff. That's on top of the previous 20% levied by the administration, for a total import tariff of 54%. And a note titled Tariff Tantrum, U.S.-based Jefferies analyst Randall Koenig says the new tariff announcement makes retailers' guidance and mitigation strategies, quote, essentially fruitless, and all footwear and apparel margins will be affected. The question comes, where do we go from here? 34% of footwear sold in the U.S. last year was imported from Vietnam. That was second behind China. Similar picture for apparel. Some of the retailers most exposed to manufacturing in Vietnam include Nike, On, Lululemon, American Eagle, Wayfair. We know Abercrombie has a lot of exposure as well, and many, many others. retailers, frankly, have a lot to figure out. In the meantime, the lobby groups are speaking out on their behalf. While I imagine the war rooms are going to be packed and busy today, Steve Lamar, president and CEO of the American Apparel and Footwear Association, saying in part for companies that have been in a wait-and-see mode, the chaos of the last few months, coupled with the confusion from today's announcement, that was from yesterday, has only created more uncertainty. So,
good stuff,
Andrew, a lot
Albert.
of the
Thank you.
retailers...
And uncertainty is really where the markets are, because as we have touched on along the way, because these were not unanticipated, although this is far more draconian, I think, than was expected. But this is sort of worst case, I guess. But it's the total not knowing that creates so many issues for the marketplace. There's just no way that they can compensate. It's been talked about. I feel like we were first to this party talking about the American economy and the trepidation that we had about Trump's uncertainty himself, how he floats something, trial balloons, a tariff thing, then he'll make mention of something else, even like the weird stuff, the Greenland stuff, the Mexico, Canada stuff, and all of these things put the markets and those who are running businesses into a position of tentative decision-making. You really can't go forward in any kind of a surefire way. But what you saw there in that chart is all of the countries from which we get all of these products, footwear, apparel, etc., because of the low cost of labor. We in America will not compete in general with those markets. And this effort to somehow right what he's perceiving as a trade deficit is bizarre and misguided because, as I say, we're a huge consumer economy. We'll always have a trade deficit with Vietnam. Show me something else, Albert, please.
And is there any positive take on this?
Well, I can answer the second question first. I don't think there's a single positive take on this. This is all just bad. It's bad, as we talked about before, for inflation. It's bad for economic growth. It's bad for everything. But let me put this a little bit in perspective. We talked about the stock market today and how bad a day it's going to have. This chart predates that, and it goes back really to the election. And I want to just show you, because Trump's got a bunch, as we also talked briefly about before, of other economic and challenges he's facing. And so the stock market, which is this red line, our stock market, we start out here. And he was doing pretty well after the election. There was this burst of Trump euphoria, as we saw in 2016 as well. But since Inauguration Day, it has basically been straight down for our stock market. And that is a combination of anticipation of these tariffs, but also just all the chaos and commotion down there, the cutting, the Doge, all this stuff, and the uncertainty has really scared the market. And that's actually in stark contrast. China, which has had a terrible run in its stock market, has actually done exceptionally well. And even Europe, which is certainly nothing to brag about on the economic front, has way outperformed us. So Trump had a set of challenges already, as represented by the stock market before. And again, before yesterday, because we don't have updated numbers just yet, economists were taking down their projections for the economy for this year. So Goldman Sachs thinks that unemployment, which they thought was going to be 4%, they now think is going to be 4.5%. And these numbers are going to get worse when they put out a new forecast. Inflation, which they thought was going to be between 2 and 2.5%, they now think is going to be almost 3.5%. And economic growth, which was supposed to be almost 2.5%, they've taken down to 1%. And let me just inject, the last quarter of the Biden administration, economic growth was 2.8%, and inflation was down in the 3% range. And so they have taken an economy that was actually in pretty decent shape and moving in the right direction, and they are going to turn it upside down, and I think 50-50 into a recession.
Wow, 50-50.
Well, I mean, that states it and charts it pretty starkly. And by the way, I see this in the chat from the MAGA supporters and those who are provocateurs, sort of in that way. Delwood is among them. I don't know if that's his real name, but I like that he chose that name, Delwood. I think it's a cool name to choose. Market drop is only part of anticipated correction after a 60% growth over the past 2 to 3 years. Normal correction, looking for a reason. And reason is in quotes. That is the classic BS line after a huge drop in a market like this. This is a capitulatory, without question, a capitulatory period for the market. That means the market is in this way surrendering to what is a problem from an external decision. In this case, it was Donald Trump and his tariffs. Don't tell me that the entire world market, looking for a reason to take profits for this correction, has taken this day after this announcement of these bizarre tariffs, which don't track, don't pencil out, don't have any logic underpinning them. Don't tell me that this is a normal correction. It's not. And you know that, Delwood, but you're slinging the same BS that you're seeing over on Fox News Channel. So cool that you're so good with it, but you know the truth. What else do you have, Albert?
I mean, you can't really make it sound madder, can you? What did you make of all that, Matthew, while it was happening? Were you
London
excited?
Times Radio.
No. I've given up attempts to deconstruct the mental processes of Donald Trump. I think we're all trying to persuade ourselves that he is playing some very clever game and trying to work out what the game is. I think he might just be going a bit gaga.
But there's a lot of people around him who must either be accommodating or agreeing with, or maybe exploiting the gaga.
Yeah, but when someone at the top goes a bit crazy, the courtiers grovel.
Well, look, Manvi, if there is a philosophy here, and there sort of is a philosophy, when he talks about the worst offenders, when he talks about the worst offenders, what he means is the people who sell loads of stuff to the US but don't buy anything from the US, basically. But I mean, you take someone like Vietnam, right? Can they really expect that Vietnam is going to buy as many American goods as America buys Vietnam goods? They've got a population a third of the size. The average income is under $700 a month. How many Teslas are they going to need?
Well, it's the wrong medicine for another problem, if you know what I mean. He's completely got this wrong, and I'm not sure there is a philosophy around this. I think Matthew's right. The last time he did mad things, we called them out as being mad things, and this time we're all sort of desperate to see some great strategy. But with these tariffs in particular, there were briefings less than a week ago that even people in the White House didn't know what numbers he was going to pick for different countries. It was all so random. I interviewed somebody from the Heritage Foundation. This is, the spiritual home of Trumpian economics, about a week ago, and we thought he was coming on to defend tariffs and explain the great philosophy behind them, which, would have been interesting enough and we could pick out holes. But he didn't. He was like, this was never how they were intended to be used. He's using them sort of, he's like a kid. He's using them as power over other countries. He throws them
exactly right.
in. He takes them away at whim for reasons which are very rarely economic.
Very good. I thought a couple of things stood out there in that London radio conversation that we just heard, one of which was what she had just mentioned. We had talked about it and talk about it a lot, which is sort of this the Mad King thing. The fact that he does things on a whim and then doesn't apologize, doesn't pivot, and he wants the groveling of the courtiers. I thought that was the other thing that was said, and he's got it. I mean, he has a complete capitulation of a political party in America. The GOP is completely in his grasp. And I would also say that the one, because I really think I'm compelled to say it after I've just sort of talked about the fact that the GOP is really in his control, the GOP senators who did break with him and got with the Democrats to try to roll back this national emergency status that he declared, which gave him give him the possibility of instituting these tariffs without having to go through Congress. So he's able to do this in a different way than it would be done normally. The Republicans showed some courage, a handful of them, Rand Paul, Susan Collins, those types, in the Senate. And so they've actually pushed a bill to the House that will, again, roll back the president's power, essentially, this emergency power that he declared. But it won't pass in the House. It may not even go up for a vote in the House. So you do see the first rumblings of the GOP realizing that this guy may hurt them in their constituencies, in their political aspirations, and just in their political security. It just all may begin to ebb away as the pain from what is a ridiculous policy. I mean, again, it's not underpinned by any logic. It's being called out by every economist, and you just, I think, may see more breaks in the dam, but we will see. As I say, all you saw on the Senate side was a handful, but that was enough because the Senate is such a close vote to begin with. Anyway, that's a little bit around the horn. Do you have one more, and I'll get to Suzanne? Give me one more on the way out here, Albert.
We're going to have the baseline tariffs coming.
Go ahead. This is Besant, I think, isn't it?
First, then there are reciprocal tariffs, a little bit more of a different rate for each individual trading partner. Are you preparing to negotiate with some of these trading partners before that tariff rate comes into effect on April 9th?
Well, I think there have been a lot of discussions, but I think we're just going to have to wait and see what would happen. What I would say, Anne-Marie, is I would advise none of the countries to panic. I wouldn't try to retaliate, because as long as you don't retaliate, this is the high end of the number. And I think the market could have certainty that this is the number barring retaliation. So we've got a ceiling, and then we can see if there's a different floor.
So you sound like you're ready
Stop for a second.
negotiation.
Listen to him. That's the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Do you hear in him, he knows that this is crazy. And so he is offering this kind of tepid request, which is, don't retaliate. He doesn't want a trade war. I promise you, Scott Bessent doesn't even want this policy. But listen to him in his answer, in a way, get his plea out. Go ahead. A little bit more, Albert, please.
A number of these partners, has the European Union, has China, has India, have these countries reached out?
Well, they've all reached out, but it's going to be up to President Trump to see what he wants to do. I think the mindset might be to let things settle for a while. Their tariffs or non-tariff barriers have been on a long time, so we'll see where it goes from here.
Well, that is the worst news for everybody, that essentially they're not taking a meeting. The calls are coming in, but we're not taking meetings right now, is what Scott Bessent says. We'll talk more about that, but that's the U.S. Treasury Secretary. And as I say, he falls into the category of all the rest of these guys. And they're enablers. They want to keep their jobs, and so as a result, they have to suck up to the president. Yes, Mr. Mad King, you're a genius. Wow, thank you for making America great again. So we continue.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Right on. We've got a great Mark's Madness going. If you're just joining us, it is a couple of classic drops, and we will update them after I get to our next guest. I'm so excited for her success. She's a longtime journalist and friend, and she kind of has been involved in these journeys of self-discovery, I think, kind of as I watch her on social media. And one of those journeys involved a discovery that led to a very high-profile podcast, and it's called The Man Who Calculated Death. Here she is, Suzanne Rico, everybody. Look at you. How are you?
It's great to be here. Just as I was in the waiting room, I'm listening to your voice, which I've always loved. I think you have the best voice in show business. And just hearing you kind of fight the good fight, buddy, hats off to you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Yeah, these are scary times in a way. But I'm really excited for not only your success, but this story has taken on kind of a momentum and a profile. I know you were nominated for whatever the podcast awards are. I'm chuckling. The podcast awards probably should be more significant than the Oscars, because podcasts, I feel, are really the way in which people who communicate, like yourself, journalists, et cetera, punch through. But anyway, so you've been recognized in all of these ways. Tell me about The Man Who Calculated Death.
So The Man Who Calculated Death was something that was a complete surprise to me, even though it is a deep dive into my own family ancestry, because growing up, like, nobody really wants to ask questions like, hey, was grandpa a Nazi, or, what's the deal? And my mom was a World War II survivor. She was 11 years old when she emigrated. Her mother was killed in this really violent, mysterious way. She survived one of the terror bombings when her city burned to the ground all around her. She had so much trauma that she did not want to talk about it. So it wasn't until fast forward in 2013 when she died that her last request was that my sisters and I would finish the memoir about her childhood. And we thought, okay, this is going to be easy. Like, right? She's written most of it. We'll just go in and make a few edits and clean it up. Oh my gosh, it was anything but. And that really kicked off this 10-year deep dive and all these different discoveries. I mean, I've been working on it full time since COVID, since 2020. And this is you're seeing my grandfather. His name was Robert Lesser. He was an aeronautical engineer who got sucked in to the Nazi regime bit by bit. And
tell us, just not to interrupt, but tell us particularly, just to go back, your mom, et cetera, your family, where are they during this whole thing? World War II and the rise of Nazism. Where are they living?
Yeah, so they bounced around a lot because my grandfather was constantly getting new jobs. So they were in Stuttgart at the very beginning, and actually then he went to the Messerschmitt factory where he designed the Bf-109, which turned out to be the backbone of the German Luftwaffe. I mean, it is still the most produced warplane in history, the Bf-109. So he got lots of accolades and acclaim for that. And then they moved to the Baltic Sea and he worked for another company. And then through this crazy conspiracy that I uncovered that my mother didn't even know, he was brought up on war crimes charges by the Nazis because they thought he was sabotaging the planes. So all of it, Mark, I never dreamed that when I started this project that it would be so relevant in today's times, right? I mean, the rise of authoritarianism that we're seeing in the United States and in Germany with the AfD, this is exactly what happened to my family. Is he was not an ideological Nazi. He hated Adolf Hitler, but slowly, he got sucked into that. And before you knew it, he was creating a weapon of mass destruction for Adolf Hitler.
Just chilling. It really is chilling. Yeah. And so take us, just the series is up and we'll have a link to it under this video, The Man Who Calculated Death. But take us a little bit through some of the specifics as you made these discoveries. I mean, a couple of those revelatory moments or where you realized, oh my God, this is something. I mean, it seems as though your family, maybe because of the German background and World War II and the rise of Nazism, there probably were a lot of things that were not discussed because it was embarrassing or shameful or,
If you talk, Mark, to, and I know you have, World War II survivors, whether it's Holocaust, whether it's Germans, the actual survivors who have died out a lot by now, it was just too awful for them to revisit, right? So I feel like it's kind of fallen to my generation to talk about it, right? To really bring the stories to light. And one of the things that is crazy to me that I discovered in this journey was that my grandmother, who was married to this Nazi aeronautical engineer, she actually had tainted blood. And she was a gypsy descendant, which we can't say gypsy, right? That was the derisive term that they used for them. They're the Roma people. But that was a secret that they had to keep. And they buried it so well that my mom had heard like bits and like maybe little whispers through open windows. But it wasn't until I started digging in that I found the story of the fact that they had buried that past so that it could not come back and either send them to a concentration camp or get them killed with the Nazi regime.
And the mother lode of information for you was your mother's writings?
My mom, when she died, again, I thought it was going to be easy. I thought I was just going to be cleaning up and doing some edits, right? And then my sister and I went into her office and we found just this treasure trove, including, let me give you just a couple of teases. We found a telegram that was sent from Hermann Göring to my grandfather. Hermann Göring was Hitler's number 2. And it was a congratulatory telegram for his creation of the V1 flying bomb, because 3 days earlier, it had hit a church in England and killed 123 people. So it was like, I was reading this and I'm like, oh my God, this is a telegram from like the top Nazi congratulating my grandfather? And how do I get my arms and my emotions around the fact that he was so integral in deaths, thousands, tens of thousands of deaths.
You knew your grandfather?
Nope. He died in 1969.
Okay. So the connections had to sort of be worked in the ways, almost journalistically, the way you're kind of used to working connections.
Not almost journalistically. This was the hardest journalism I have ever done. And the last 2 episodes of the podcast, Mark, focus on the question of who killed my grandmother and why. And the legend in my family, which makes a lot of sense, was that my grandfather had created this vengeance weapon, which wreaked havoc on England. And so the Allies wanted a little vengeance of their own. So they bombed this farmhouse out in the middle of a Bavarian forest full of women and children. Like, why would they do that, right? You don't bomb a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere unless you're trying to send a message. So that was the legend, and nobody had ever been able to prove it. And I actually found the answer.
Wow.
It took me forever.
It's an extraordinary personal journey that you share with us. And I look forward to The Man Who Calculated Death continuing to, enrapture a lot of people. I mean, it's really become very, very popular podcast. And you can find it in a few different places. Isn't that right, Suzanne Rico?
Yeah, you can find it Apple, Spotify, Wondery. I mean, right now it's rolling out on a free basis. So we just released episode 4. There are 9 in total. And by the way, Mark, it just won the Gracie Award for Best Writing, which is very exciting.
Oh, that's terrific. Congratulations on there you go. Wow.
That's a big one for me because I'm a writer, right? So that somebody is recognizing the fact that I did well with this is huge. But you can find it out for free. New episodes drop every Tuesday. And, I'm excited and nervous to share it with the world because the information and the storyline and the themes are so sensitive. But yet, I think if we don't tell stories like this, then we lose the lessons of the past, which we absolutely need for the future.
Well, I think not only is that true, but you have a personal connection to this story. So as you say, sharing it serves what you're talking about, but also your personal journey, I think, makes it even more compelling emotionally. So the man who...
I just want to say one more thing, which I was shocked. The first, again, because nobody wants to go out there and say like, hey, I have this Nazi background. Like, it's nerve-wracking. But I made my first post on my social media, which is SuzanneRico.com or Suzanne Rico on all socials. And I went out and I made this post, Mark. It's got almost 2 million views.
Wow.
Like, it's resonating. And the second one has almost 1 million views. So people are resonating, I think, with the story. And, I'm just going to keep telling it and hope that it can teach some important lessons.
Well, I mean, clearly it's punched through, so congratulations. So for those who aren't aware of it yet, it is The Man Who Calculated Death. Find it where you find podcasts. Suzanne, come back. A lot of love for you in the chat. So come back and visit. Do another podcast. Find another Nazi member of your family and come back.
Done with Nazis. Let's move on.
Yeah, okay. Off Nazis. Something else.
All right, Mark, thank you.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you soon.
All
Bye-bye.
right,
Suzanne Rico, everybody. Good stuff. Love it, love it, love it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Still minutes away from the former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney David Katz. And that's he's got a lot on his plate. That'll be a pretty substantial conversation as we get into what's happening with the law and this administration. We did a lot on tariffs. We'll continue to revisit that, but I felt like we took you around the horn, gave you some international reaction, also gave you some reaction from inside the administration. You heard from the Treasury Secretary Bessent, and I think you get from also leading economists the idea that people feel within the community of economists as though this is utterly misguided and without explanation. But it is the stuff that we're dealing with today. The Wall Street Journal went after this as well. They said in this editorial, Trump's new protectionist age. And remember, the Wall Street Journal is a conservative, Murdoch-owned outlet. They point to a range of possible repercussions, including potential retaliation from foreign governments, higher prices certainly for American consumers, economic pain for U.S. exporters, the end, this is a quote, of U.S. economic leadership. They also predict in the Wall Street Journal that China could attempt to expand its influence by using its large market to court American allies. Quote, this is far from a comprehensive list, but we offer them, that meaning China, as offer in the list, as food for thought as Mr. Trump builds his new protectionist world. In other words, they're saying, hey, all of these bad things can happen, this list of bad things, and likely will happen if you continue with these protectionist policies. Remaking the world economy, this is a quote, has large consequences, and they may not all add up to what Mr. Trump advertises as a new golden age. That from the Wall Street Journal. And JP Morgan is saying that Trump's tariffs are likely to trigger recession. Quote, these policies, if sustained, would be likely pushing the U.S. and global economies into recession this year. We view the implementation of these policies as a substantial macroeconomic shock not currently incorporated in our forecast. That's from JP Morgan. And, again, I told you that Congress tried to seize from the president the power of levying taxes and tariffs on Canada. That doesn't appear to be going anywhere, although it passed in the Senate. But that is the state of the state. For now, these continue. I did want to mention that Signalgate has continued expanding. And by the way, Mike Waltz, he's the guy who is the national security guy who basically set up that whole Signal chat. There's a lot of talk about the fact that, he should be fired. I mean, anybody else would be fired. Anybody else in government who made this mistake would be fired. Anybody in the Biden administration you'd think would be fired. Certainly, if it had happened under Biden, there'd be calls from Fox News Channel on the right. Why aren't you firing this guy, et cetera? So Waltz from White House insiders probably won't be fired. Can you think of why? Because Trump feels if we fire Waltz, it makes us look bad. It gives a win to the libs. He said it in almost those exact words. So for that reason, you have this Mike Waltz hanging on. And I'll just give you as an aside something about Mike Waltz. Mike Waltz is a hawk. I've mentioned this to you before, but I just want to mention it again since he seems to be somebody who's going to be hanging out there in the administration. He's a hawk on Iran. He's a hawk on the Middle East. He is the old school Republican hawk about Iran. And so with him still there with the president's ear, to whatever extent he has it, I worry about that. This from the latest in Politico. Amid the backlash to the Trump administration's use of the private messaging app Signal for sensitive U.S. military planning in Yemen, Mike Waltz's team apparently set up at least 20 chats like that. This wasn't, what did I say? I said they do this all the time. Remember me saying that? I said they do it all the time for convenience. I promise you they do this all the time. Now we have evidence that Waltz's team set up at least 20 chats like this one. The people use the group chats to discuss issues related to China and Ukraine and Europe. Also Gaza and the Middle East, along with other regions, according to reporting. 4 people who were personally added to the Signal chats offered corroborating evidence on this. They all said that sensitive information had been discussed there. One said, quote, Waltz built the entire NSC communications process on Signal. So this alongside the Washington Post reporting on the fact that he uses his personal Gmail account along with other staffers at the National Security Administration. They're using their personal Gmail accounts to discuss government business. It's incompetence. It's the gang that couldn't shoot straight. Not only do you have bad policy, but you have utter recklessness and carelessness. And this is what you see in every aspect of what they're doing. I mean, these guys were poised to move into government for all of this time during the Biden administration. Project 2025 came out. Russell Vought wrote a bunch of it. You know, he was at OMB before. Now he's again at this Office of Management and Budget, and he's instituting all of these things from Project 2025. But the reason I mention it is they had all that time to get things in smoothly, to evaluate government. Where are we going to cut? Where are there inefficiencies? Where is there fraud? If you were really serious about doing it, you would do it that way. But that's not the way they did it. They brought in Elon Musk and his, wannabe tech bros, and they moved into government and they just took to it with a hatchet. And they got rid of critical people in critical roles and critical administrative institutions. It's utter absurdity, but it's where we are. And all I'm trying to say is that carelessness, that recklessness, is played out in every aspect of what they're doing. Look at their immigration stuff. Again, if you were serious about this immigration problem, which you should be, you would handle the border, you would handle the way in which judges look at these various asylum petitions, et cetera, along the lines, frankly, of the bill that passed or was going to pass, but Trump said don't pass it, where there was all that money for additional immigration courts. Now, all of that stuff would have helped. But at least you would have prioritized, if you're an incoming administration, we're going to take the bad guys, we're going to deport them. Instead, they just scoop people up. Bad guys, good guys. It's a mess because everything they do is a mess. And so to today's tariffs. It's a mess. They're not underpinned by any kind of economic policy. They're not underpinned by any kind of solid economic thinking. They're not underpinned by any logic that any economist can actually walk you through, including those in his administration, Trump's administration. Have you heard them? We played you. We played Lutnick for you. We heard Besson. These guys, they can't explain it because it's not something that can be explained. But this carelessness, we pay a huge price for it. And I think you saw it in Signalgate, and you see it across the ways in which this administration communicates. Meantime, they've gotten rid of this just of the morning. National Security Council staffers, Laura Loomer. Do you remember her? Laura Loomer was a big part of Trump's entourage during the run-up to the election. Laura Loomer went to the White House, met with Trump in the Oval Office just yesterday. She presented Trump with opposition research on NSC staffers who she says are neocons and not sufficiently loyal to the president. This according to a source with knowledge of this. Brian Walsh, Senior Director for Intelligence, Thomas Boudry, Senior Director for Legislative Affairs, and David Feith, another Senior Director, all shown the door immediately because of her. We're showing a picture of her now, Laura Loomer. She's kind of the Trump whisperer. There was even talk during the campaign that she and Trump might be rolling around together. But she deemed these people not sufficiently loyal. And so for that reason, they were shown the door just this morning. Also, I'll mention that the IVF team at the CDC is gutted. Remember Trump calling himself the fertilization president? Well, his administration has gotten rid of the CDC's Assisted Reproductive Technology Surveillance Team. It's interesting because IVF is something that members of administration have been part of. He called himself, as I say, sort of the fertilization president. But this team that tracked how well in vitro fertilization worked across the U.S. cut sweeping layoffs at HHS, that, of course, as you know, controlled by RFK Jr. The elimination of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Assisted Reproductive Technology Surveillance Team, which is a group of 6 epidemiologists, data analysis, and researchers, shocked public health experts, they say, and IVF advocates, who said that they'd felt encouraged by President Donald Trump's comments supporting access to infertility treatments. Just last week, Trump declared himself the fertilization president. He was touting efforts to expand IVF. Fertilization, he said at a White House event just last week to commemorate Women's History Month. He said, I'm still very proud of it. I don't care. I'll be known as the fertilization president, and that's okay. But apparently not so much. The National Infertility Association, which is a nonprofit group for reproductive health, said that one of Trump's best assets to address IVF is now gone. So, again, all casualties of what's happening with the wanton destruction of government. I mean, again, government isn't all good and government isn't all bad. But I'd suggest there's way more good about government than bad. The U.S. government lifts up a lot of people and a lot of things and supports a lot of efforts that otherwise would die in the private sector. And for that reason, I lament what's happening in government. I think it's a real loss. There's this, if you negotiate and compromise, you wind up having to share credit for any success, says Cousin Erie. That is a thing he will not do. That's probably true. Probably true. Thank you for the super chat. I think that's actually a decent point. He is kind of, again, there's so much ego and there's so much insecurity and there's so much sort of megalomania associated with Trump. It's hard to know exactly, what the primary explanation for what he's doing is. Albert, I did want to recognize Lori Dolly. Are you kidding? Lori Dolly with a $50 super chat. I mean, that is insanely generous.
Big shout out.
Big shout out, Lori. Snazzy light gray jacket today, Mark. Very classy. Also, thanks, Team Mark, for everything you do to help keep us informed. Wow. I subscribe and listen to many of your guest platforms, too. I'm a full-time worker, and it means I stay up late to get it all in. Wow. Thank you, Lori. Thank you for supporting many of the people who come through, and thank you for supporting our team. We work really hard, and it's hard. It's not, I won't tell you. It's hard. And Albert makes it fun to come to work, of course, because
Albert, thank you.
He is just that kind of presence, but it's still a job, and I appreciate you recognizing it. But I think it's important, and believe me, we all like being here. Chaplain Fred, we haven't heard from in a while, and another $50. Wow, this is great.
Big shout out.
Very much appreciated during a lean time for the show. Hello, Mark and Kim. It is a pleasure to listen to your show. I've been listening to Mexico's president, and she expressed that Mexico is not being affected. Per Trump, he will set up a work visa for farm workers. Talk about cry wolf on immigrants. Yeah, I mean, maybe Donald Trump got the memo, Chaplain Fred, that these workers are critical to America's agricultural economy. But I'm talking about the economy of California and also across portions of the Plain States. But your comment is right on, which is, but I'll tell you what your comment also does. It provokes a thought process, which includes, maybe he'll modify his position on things. It's possible. But I don't see his I don't see his position moderating much. But as you just suggested, he's already moderated on the farm workers. So thank you, Chaplain Fred. Mars gives a $5 super chat to the show for Kim filling in. Kim was great. Is that MAGA Mars or a different Mars? If it's
It might be a
MAGA
different Mars. I'm not
different
sure.
Mars, I think. Yeah, that's what I think as well. But anyway, I am going to, I was just, thank you for, guys, I really appreciate that. We're a crowd-funded show, and it's been a kind of a lean time on the show. And so I really appreciate you subscribing. I also appreciate your super chats and your super stickers. And lastly, if you want to be part of our Patreon and PayPal community, please jump on Patreon or PayPal through the website, themarkthompsonshow.com, themarkthompsonshow.com. Yeah, there is another Mark Thompson. There are 6 jillion others. And if you go to Mark Thompson without the Mark Thompson Show, you go to Mark Thompson Show, you get to a ventriloquist website. and I'm sure he'll appreciate your support, but it doesn't do us any good. So it is themarkthompsonshow.com. Again, there are hot links to both Patreon and PayPal, and you can contribute. And again, I'd mentioned this the other day, Patreon's done this thing, and this actually is really right on when it comes to tariffs. Apple put a tariff on Patreon, and the Apple tariff, the Patreon app I'm talking about. So if you go into the app of Patreon and you become part of our show, you contribute, let's say $30 a month. They will take $10 of that. So it only ends up being $20 a month to us. So that's if you go through the app. But if you go through our website or you go through patreon.com, just on the web, then it's fine. But people have asked me about it. That's the way they work. But that's a tariff, right? That's a tax. That's a tax on Patreon for being in the App Store. And if you use the app, Apple is saying, hey, we're going to tax it 30%, and that's taken from us. So themarkthompsonshow.com, click on Patreon, or PayPal works really well. Love those communities. I wanted to do, Albert, at some point, my orgy of thanks. Maybe we can do that next week. I have got Mark's Madness going on because I really appreciate everybody who's jumped on through Patreon and PayPal and supports us all the time. And again, want an opportunity to thank you. Vivian Alshawa, a super sticker for $10. She is an OG of the show.
Out.
Thank you, all you guys who've been here since the very beginning. We were a radio show out of San Francisco, and in a huge media conglomerate move, they literally got rid of the whole radio station. I mean, this is a huge station with a powerful signal, show doing well, but it was just a line item for them. They got rid of it. And so we took the show over here, and obviously we've evolved the show a bit as well, but a lot of the segments that we do and certainly the people that we feel connected to come out of that radio show. So that's sort of our history, and I appreciate all the support.
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, I am in the middle of a Mark's Madness. Albert, please, if you would, give me an idea of what's happening in the latest voting.
Now, Mark's Madness.
Yeah, just give me, we had two drops going up against each other last hour, and they continue until midnight tonight. The voting continues till midnight in the post section of our YouTube channel. And Albert is the commissioner of Mark's Madness. Commish, anything to relate before we...
It's still like 50-50 for the first hour of voting.
Wow, it really is. Look, coffee
I did
down.
kind of influence it by saying that I did like the drop. I feel like people might have pulled for me a little bit, so... Just taking the page out of the administration to just, flex some power that I have.
So coffee down is...
Put that coffee down.
Is going up against going back to Texas.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
Right. So they are pretty much in a dead heat. Coffee down trails 46% to 54%. And as you know, yesterday, Larry King's scene went down to AOC baby girl. So
and here's some of the fallout before we get to the new drops. Michael Snyder, the culture blaster, is alone at the top.
Wow, Michael Snyder is, look at that, 16 wins and only 2 losses. Michael Snyder, top of the leaderboard. Then Matt Rapanich is back up. Wasn't he there at the beginning, Albert? And
yeah,
then
he was the last perfect bracket, and then I think the last 2 drops of the first round, he lost both of those. But he went back. He's back on a heater, so it's exciting. And Daniel Martin was also, I think, top 3 last year.
I have made a decision, Albert. I wanted to share it with you, and you're hearing it for the first time, and the audience is hearing it for the first time. The decision is I'd like to award the top 3 winners, not the wine. The wine only goes to the top winner, but with complimentary admission into our big May meetup. It's going to be a big meetup in May on this show. And it's a big because we passed the 100,000 subscriber thing and all that. And there's sort of the explosion of enthusiasm that has followed. It will be a magnificent party, I think, in our May meetup. So our May meetup is a
That might be warranted for a major announcement.
A major announcement from the Mark Thompson Show. A major announcement.
Thank you, Albert. You're absolutely right. And I will announce it that the top 3 finishers will receive complimentary admission into our virtual May meetup, everyone. And that will be a party unlike anything you've seen. I almost want to say, there's never been anything.
I've never seen anything like it.
Thank you. I really was going to.
There's never been anything like this.
I mean,
I have never heard of something like that.
Yeah,
There is nothing in our history that quite compares.
I don't know. All I'm trying to say is.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
Okay, I'm saying that May is when we'll do that. So that'll be our major virtual meetup in May, and the top 3 finishers in Mark's Madness will all get in for free.
Now, Mark's Madness.
All right, let's finish it out. Kind of exciting. 2 drops go up against each other. You'll vote for either.
Who is having that conversation?
Or.
We could try ignoring it, sir.
Again, this is Sweet 16. You'll vote for either.
Who is having that conversation?
Or.
We could try ignoring it, sir.
Oh, it's Oprah versus ignoring it. You'll have till midnight tonight to make your vote in the post section of our YouTube channel. I'm excited about it, Albert, I tell you. Here it is. Albert's posted a little bit of where we sit. Coffee down, going back to Texas, going up against each other from the first hour. Oprah conversation and try ignoring it in the second hour here. Again, both have until midnight tonight to garner votes, but Sweet 16 is where dreams are realized and setbacks are oftentimes the thing that blows people out. Crazy. I did want to share a piece of negative email that we got, which
I've received a lot of positive letters.
All right. Well, I mean, this is from Janet G. Hi, Mark and team. I love the show. Here comes the but. But I was disappointed that yesterday you focused on the physical nature of Cory Booker's incredible marathon speech, catheters, etc., and not the content. What you did play of his speech was minimal, with little comment. Of course, being up there for 25 hours without eating, drinking, and using the bathroom is hard to even imagine, but it was his amazing, heartfelt words, his passion for us Americans, and his dedication to getting the Democrats back in the game that are most important. It was a huge accomplishment for him, the Democratic Party, and he did it to help us. I hope in the coming days you will talk more about his speech and the effect it is already having on the Democratic Party. He is giving me hope for sure. Thank you, JG. I think it's a legitimate criticism, actually. I think we did get distracted by the catheter stuff. I think part of it is that the chat seemed obsessed with it, but maybe I have to go back and look. Maybe we were obsessed with it and the chat was just jumping on our obsession. So I don't disagree with you, really. I mentioned that he was quoting John Lewis, and I mentioned only at the very end of his remarks sort of the, if you will, some of the stuff that had formed Cory Booker's comments. But you're right, we didn't run a lot of what he said. And so I think I take to heart what you have pointed out and try to be better. I mean, Booker was, I said he didn't just read from, the way that Strom Thurmond had, the segregationist who had the record on speaking the longest. Thurmond, read from the phone book, I think. He read from encyclopedia. He took bathroom breaks, and Booker did none of those things. But I don't think we got into a lot of the substance of his speech. I did say he spoke eloquently for 25 hours. I think he did. You have a little bit of that audio, Albert? We can fade it up now as a make good.
He would not normalize
a
moment like this. He would not just go along with business as usual. He wouldn't know how to solve it. But there's one thing that he would do that I hope we all can do that I think I did a little bit of tonight. He said for us to go out and cause some good trouble necessary trouble to redeem the soul of our nation. I want you to redeem the dream. When our founder said we must mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We need that now from all Americans. This is a moral moment. It's not left or right, it's right or wrong.
All right, Albert, thank you.
It's getting good.
I think Booker is just terrific. You'll recall we shot craps together in Las Vegas. That's my only connection to Cory Booker.
What?
We got that picture. Yes, we got the picture. He's there at the craps table. It's only three of us. And there he was. And it was quite cool to, no one recognized him except me. But it was very cool to see him. But anyway, I guess all I'm trying to say is he's one of my favorites for a lot of reasons. I mean, he is, I think, a fair-minded politician who speaks so beautifully and so on point about any number of things. And I'm sorry if I gave him short shrift, but I think, what he did was quite extraordinary indeed. So bravo for your email, for pointing it out, and we'll try to be better. So, David Katz joins next. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yes, indeed. I will tell you, if you haven't yet, you please do us all a favor. Do yourself a favor. Ensure that place in heaven, my friends. Smash that like button.
Smash it with your iron rod.
That's right. Smash it with your iron rod. And Albert, unless you have any other reason that I should be doing anything else, I'd like to get right to our special guest. And
he's ready.
All right, hang on a second. I just want to get to I do want to recognize Debbie. Okay, Mars, I see your $5 and raise you or anyone $15 for Kim's filling in. Wow. Thank you, Debbie, with a $20 super chat. Who knew there was that a kind of a bidding war over recognizing Kim's work? Tammy with a shout out to Michael Snyder. Very true. Michael Snyder atop the leaderboard. Mars says, okay, Debbie, I call your 20 for Kim. This is for Kim filling in. Very, very cool. Thank you, Mars, and thank you, Debbie. Walter, aloha, Debbie, I'm in. Tip jar conga line. Come on.
Big shout out.
Big shout out to Walter. Thank you for the super chat for another $20. Wow. Very cool. Did someone say orgy? That's right, the orgy of thanks. Wes Theory, thank you, Wes. You're an OG.
Big shout out.
I appreciate that. Lucy McAllister remains atop my leaderboard of McAllisters. She is my favorite. Super sticker for $20.
Big shout out.
Shout out to Lucy McAllister. All right, thanks everyone. Let's jump on an expert and see what he can tell us about what's happening in the world.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Across the English-speaking world, this guy is without peer. I think he's one of the great legal minds and legal analysts. You'll hear him on London radio. You'll hear him on News Nation, also on Fox News Channel, and across America, and Channel 5 in Washington, Channel 5 in New York, Channel 2 in Los Angeles, and then over to Australia and New Zealand. Keeping up with this guy's media profile is a full-time job. We get him on Thursdays. How about it for the great David Katz, the former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney.
Great to be with you, Mark.
It is really great to have you here, sir. You're so generous with your time.
I hope your hand is doing better, and I hope you're feeling better, Mark. I know you're going through a lot.
Yeah, thank you, pal. Thank you. Hey, I want to ask you about, speaking of going through a lot, the craziness with which the Trump immigration policy involves ICE agents scooping up people and sending them off to these, max prison equivalents in El Salvador. These Venezuelans, we identified it at the time in early reporting, the fact that there were mistakes made. I mean, it seems as though this crew that, shares war plans on Signal, that is sloppy about the way that they're dismantling government, getting rid of a lot of critical government workers alongside whatever they feel is the fraud and abuse. It's just this recklessness. It's a it's an utter disregard sort of for doing things in any kind of careful fashion. And so in a way, I'm not surprised that when they scoop up all of these Venezuelans and they tell us that they're all gang members, of course, 3 of them are not, 3 that we know of. They're in El Salvador, and the American government is saying, hey, we can't do anything. They're in El Salvador now, and there hasn't even been a phone call on their behalf. Can you speak to this situation and sort of the legal ramifications or limitations or even remedies for this?
Well, this has been as they say, not a bug, but a feature. This wanton cruelty and also indiscriminate treatment without due process. And so, of course, they're going to make mistakes. Now, you'll remember the famous publicity stunt flight that cost a huge amount of money, more than a regular flight would have, the military flight down there. And that was touted as removing the worst of the worst. It turned out that more than half the people on those flights, the ones that went to Guantanamo, it cost us millions and millions of dollars, and then basically had to all be walked back, including the troops that were sent there at great expense. They were all walked back physically. We're not using Guantanamo, but while they were all gung-ho at showing the worst of the worst are going to Guantanamo, it turned out that more than half the people on the flight had not been convicted of anything. The worst that more than half the worst thing that more than half the people on those flights, Mark, had done was crossing the border without permission, which is a civil wrong. Now we have this fiasco, and this is the one with Chief Judge Boasberg in Washington, D.C., where he said, turn the flights around. They're having a hearing today because they haven't given the court, the federal court, the U.S. government has not given the federal court straight answers. First, they appear to have prevaricated, is a nice way of saying they lied to the court. They hid things from the court, is what it looks like. And then on top of that, they said that they were state secrets. Why a plane left weeks ago from Texas and what time it left and when it got over international waters turns out to be a state secret. Of course, everyone's lampooning that because talking about an attack that's going to be launched on Yemen 2 hours later and being on a group chat, including with a news reporter, that was, of course, no big deal. But telling the judge when this plane left Texas 2 weeks ago, and of course, the reason is it's going to be self-incriminating. I joked before they ought to give those lawyers for DOJ, I guess they're ambitious, they're Trumpsters, they're going into court, and they need to be given a Miranda warning because, of course, the answers are going to be that they knew very well about the judge's order, and somebody high up said, what the hell? They called somebody right away, Mark, as soon as the judge issued his oral ruling that said, turn the planes around. And it looks like they could have turned both the planes around at that point and did not. And a third plane that hadn't yet taken off took off. So this has been an utter fiasco. And now, of course, we're treated to the fact that some people were deported based on their tattoos. And if you're harassed by the gang and you're jumped into the gang and you don't want to be a part of a gang and they stick a tattoo on you, guess what? According to the Department of Justice and the INS, without having due process in front of a court or a board, that tattoo alone is enough. In other words, you get a victim tattoo and that now makes you deportable without any hearing. And that's apparently exactly what happened to this fellow from Maryland. Now, you see, if they had any sense, Mark, like, I was in the Reagan administration, me and a lot of other Democrats, and the way that they tended to proceed was by the rule of law. So if this had happened, let's say in the Reagan administration, what would have happened was that the 3 people who have a colorable claim would have been brought right back. Think about it, Mark. You bring them right back. El Salvador is going to bring them right back. They don't need this international incident on their hands. Someone's telling them, do what we say, play hardball. Don't ever send them back. We're going to tell the court you have no jurisdiction to bring the person back, even after they were wrongly deported. Now, they're going to lose on that in court. They're going to lose on that in the court of public opinion. And if they wanted to actually, this is what people say, why don't they do anything in a tailored, orderly way? The tailored, orderly way is after a fiasco like that, you bring back anybody that there's a question about. And yes, they say it's a hellhole. It was horrible being down there. They hold a press conference. Okay, you live with that rather than this situation where you say to the federal court, we made an error. We deported the wrong guy. Now he's in a foreign country. You can't do anything about it, Your Honor. Not going anywhere. Just stupid.
So the answer is, and I think you really did kind of address it right away when you said it's a feature, not a bug. The answer is these guys aren't going anywhere. They're going to languish there in that prison. And Yeah, right.
Mark, it may be that, the Venezuelan government, they have some money if they want to spend it. They have some oil that they're extracting down in Maduro in Venezuela. They've apparently sent a pretty good legal team onto this case and made a habeas corpus petition for these folks down in El Salvador. It may be that they send them back to Venezuela. I mean, at some point, we're going to stop paying them all of this money. We're paying all this side money to this El Salvador government and this guy who's in charge down in El Salvador. We're paying him all the side money. At some point, the side money is going to, dry up. You can see it all happening. He gets some oil from Venezuela. They send 10 or 20 of these people back to Venezuela. Now, this whole thing was really sick. This was like a sick, weird thing. Her with the $50,000 Rolex watch. You see it over there?
Yeah, we're showing a picture for those just listening of Kristi Noem standing in front of the prison.
She's kind of tarted up. This is not exactly how you would expect a high government official to appear. And the whole thing, it's like very weird, Mark. If you catch my drift, here are all these guys who are, I guess they're supposed to be showing off their tattoos, but here they are, all bare-chested. It's a horrible prison with the conditions. They put them all in there. That's not like a moment, apparently, that they came to view what was going on. That's how they live 24 hours a day. They don't even get out to have any recreation. This is cruel and unusual punishment on its face. And we have, of course, connived in it. We've colluded in it. We've conspired in it. These are conditions that never would be approved by an American court. And yet we've sent these people without due process into this hellhole.
So maybe it sounds to me like you're hinting eventually there may be a remedy and some of these people will be returned, but it's between now and that remedy, there might be some time. Isn't that?
Well, I think that an American court, of course, has the power to order that they be returned. Then there would be this argument, well, we don't control El Salvador.
Well, that's what they're saying now. We don't control El Salvador. It's absurd.
El Salvador won't control them. Everybody knows this is utterly realistic. If Uncle Sam really wants one of these Central American countries to do something, and it's a matter of sending some prisoners here, there, or the other place, especially they're not even, for the most part, El Salvadorans. So what's really in it for El Salvador? We either stop paying them the side money, somebody gives them more money to do something else, they go send them somewhere. But to answer your question, Mark, the court absolutely has that power. They tell somebody, you send a plane down there and pick those people up. And then they come in and they say, well, such and such an official down in Costa Rica, or not Costa Rica, El Salvador, won't cooperate with us. And I imagine that it escalates from there. The federal judge holds that person in contempt, demands that they make a response. When they say you have no jurisdiction over me, there's all kinds of laws on international human rights violations. I imagine the next thing by the plaintiffs would be that this was an international human rights violation by the authorities down there in El Salvador. And yes, they could not come to the United States. And I suppose the judge could issue a warrant. We could see how lawful that was. But you could see where the El Salvadoran officials don't want to play that game. Warrants for their arrest, not being able to travel outside of El Salvador, all of these headaches over this. So no, they're just doing Trump's bidding. This is, and the other one that I love in this whole thing is Homan. And Homan made two crazy statements on national.
He's sort of the deporter in chief, Homan. Yeah, go ahead.
He is the deporter in chief. And one thing he says is, I don't care what a federal court thinks. Now, I tell you, even when these authoritarian regimes came into power, you pick, the monster of history. They did not come into power saying, I don't care what the courts of my country think. It's just a startling, amazing statement that every right-thinking person should say, you have to get fired when you say, in our country with its checks and balances, I don't care what the federal courts think. You cannot be an official in the executive branch and say stuff like that. The other amazing one that he said on national TV when he appeared with Mayor Adams loved that appearance on Fox and Friends, when he said, we're watching you. We're going to be up your butt. I'm not making that up. We're going to be up your butt, Homan says, to make sure that you live up to and deport these people. You allow ICE in there. And he said that on national TV. Could you imagine? It was like, I'm sure that after that, Mayor Adams said, I'd really rather not appear with that guest again because he just called me out as being an absolute quid pro quoer. He called me right out in that comfy sofa right next to me. What a debacle. And yet his ship is coming in. If we have a minute to talk about it, Adam's ship may be coming in.
Well, sure. You can say, and then I've got some other stuff to talk to you about, but please go ahead. Yeah. So you're saying your old pal, Adam Schiff, go ahead.
Oh, not Adam Schiff. This is Mayor Adams. I wanted to talk about
Mayor Adams. I would definitely, that's on an agenda item. We
Okay.
can get to it now if you want. Yeah, explain to me what's going on there, because his charges were dismissed. Now, you'll have to explain with prejudice, without prejudice, and what that means.
All that with prejudice means is you can't bring it up again. Without prejudice means temporarily we're stopping, but if we find more evidence or if we feel like it, we can bring the charges back. Most times the government dismisses without prejudice, but this was really an anomalous case. So to include also Mayor Adams's narrative in this, he's the Brooklyn borough president, and he's got a lot of friends in the Turkish government, and he's really trying to help the Turkish government. A lot of the things that he got indicted for were not when he was mayor, but when he was Brooklyn borough president, to do favors for his friends in Turkey. He does so many favors for his friends in Turkey. He's flying around on Turkish Airlines. He's buying an economy fare ticket. He's living it up in first class on Turkish Airlines. He's going to Istanbul all the time. He's having so much fun that even when Istanbul isn't on the way someplace, he goes to Istanbul so he can fly first class in, stay at a 5-star hotel in Istanbul, kick back for a couple of days, and then go to someplace that's not even like, it doesn't make any sense geographically. On top of that, he puts pressure on the fire commissioner in New York City to open up the Turkish consulate to the UN. And supposedly it doesn't have proper fire clearance, but the Turks really want it opened up. And so he leans on the fire commissioner to give it a permit. And so for all of that kind of quid pro quo conduct, he is indicted in the Biden administration. His story is that he stood up to the Biden administration, and this is true, and said, stop sending all of these immigrants into New York City. We can't afford it. This is not a good policy. Do something about it. And there was kind of a group think in the Biden administration. It's coming really home to roost. We're seeing it now, that they appeared to not be doing anything about this flood of immigrants that was coming in, this record number of immigrants, one way or the other, that was coming in at a record number. And Americans were really getting tired of it. Right or wrong, it was becoming a toxic political issue for the Democrats. And now here's a Democratic mayor of New York who stands up and says, Biden, do something about it. We can't afford it. These people, we have to put them in camps out on some island and not let the kids play soccer or softball on those, these poor kids in New York City want to play softball and soccer, and their parents want to leave them there so they can go to work, and they can't do that because you sent so many immigrants in. So his story is that he was singled out and charged with this quid pro quo, and it's not exactly the crime of the century in political corruption. And so when Trump wins, he starts screaming to Trump, hey, do something about it, help me. He goes to the inauguration. He seems to be kissing Trump's butt, saying he's going to do more about this immigration situation. Maybe he'll allow ICE into New York City to go to places where in California we're not letting them go. And he becomes a favorite of Trump, such a favorite that Trump has this guy, Beauvais. He's the very controversial deputy attorney general who says, you know what, we're going to dismiss the case against Mayor Adams, which is startling. I mean, the case was going to go to trial this summer and be a big, big deal in federal court. We're going to dismiss it, but we're going to dismiss it without prejudice, which means that we could bring it up again if we want to. And everyone said, oh, good. Now the Republican president has put a sword of Damocles over the Democratic mayor of New York City so they can control him just like a little puppet. And they can say to him, send ICE over here, whether people in New York City or the city council think it's a good idea or not. Do this task, do the other task. And they would have Mayor Adams as their little puppet because if he did anything they didn't like, they would bring up again the federal charges because it was only dismissed without prejudice. This all is seven different attorneys, some in the Southern District of New York Prosecutor's Office, some in the Public Corruption Section down in Washington, D.C., Mark, were told to file this paper with the court that said we're dismissing this case. 7 of them quit. A couple of them very noisily. This is not how the government operates. We bring cases because they're right or they're wrong. We have the law and the facts, or we don't. We don't bring them so that we can hold a sword over a public official's head or neck. And what happens, it lands in front of a judge named Judge Dale Ho in the Southern District of New York. And he says, you know, I need a special counsel. I need to appoint somebody to tell me what's the other side of this story, because Mayor Adams is saying, this is the greatest thing that ever happened. They're dismissing the case against me without prejudice. I love it. And the Department of Justice finally has some lackey in court who's saying, this is a great idea. Why don't we do this? So the judge appoints another lawyer, hears from the other lawyer, and finally the judge issued a big decision the last day or two where he says, you can dismiss the case against him because you have executive authority to prosecute or not prosecute. Judges don't prosecute. We're the judicial branch. We don't prosecute. So there's nothing we can do about it. We can't appoint somebody to go prosecute somebody. That's not our system of justice. That would be like the European system, like a magisterial system where you're sort of prosecuted by the court. Can't do that. So we can't allow the prosecution to go forward. But at the same time, it's a violation of due process and the law to have this sort of Damocles. So this case is dismissed with prejudice, gone forever from the federal court. So if I can just do my little monologue for one more minute, Mark, I'll let you in, is that there's a couple of interesting things that could happen at this point. Some of them people may think are horrible. The government has, I think, 30 days to decide to appeal. I may not have the days exactly right. Within 30 days, the government could appeal and say, no, a federal judge does not have the power to dismiss with prejudice a case that we only want dismissed without prejudice. I think that's just too inside baseball, too fraught. I don't think the government is going to do that. So the day after they don't have time to appeal, the day after this judgment becomes final, I expect Mayor Adams to say, you know what? I did the right thing for the people of New York City. I stood up to the Biden administration. Maybe I stood up in a way that made Trump happy. I'm my own man. I'm independent. I want to be your mayor again. And I think he'll run on these tickets. You know, there's not just Democrats and Republicans in New York. There's all these other tickets that are on the ballot. There's the liberals. There's the Green. There's the the conservatives, I think, have their ticket. So he'll get on as many tickets as he can. It may include the Republican ticket because he'll be the most conservative person who has a chance to win in the race. And it'll be him, Cuomo, and somebody who's probably quite liberal, because there are a lot of candidates in New York City who are quite liberal. That's how Mayor Adams won in the first place. He was sort of over on the center right, and a lot of people were over on the left, and he came out on top.
Well, that's a really interesting crew that you point to. Like, so you got Cuomo, who resigned because of all the hugging and kissing. What did he say? I do hug and kiss. I mean, that was the high ground that he found. And then you have Adams, as you've just suggested.
I take full responsibility for my actions.
This is Cuomo.
I have been too familiar with people.
Yeah, there you go. So you're saying that guy may jump back into it will be just a rogues gallery.
No. Yeah. Cuomo is in. Adams is going to try to stay in there. And they're going to run, I guess, in the Democratic primary, probably bet on Cuomo to win, right? Then Adams.
I do hug and kiss people casually.
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe he should make that put that on a poster. I do hug and kiss people.
I do hug and kiss people casually.
Right.
So Letitia James, who's the attorney general there, she's also gone after Trump, won cases against Trump. She's a nemesis of Cuomo. And she produced in her case against Cuomo lots of witnesses who were going to say that he was way too familiar with female employees of the state. And he had to resign. But the fact that he had to resign, he never got prosecuted. He's doing his comeback. So, yes, it'll be Adams recently under federal indictment. Cuomo, he's also got the nursing home scandal.
During COVID, yes. Yeah.
Take their measure of that. And then, as I say, there'll definitely be a couple of candidates further out to the left. And it may be a three-way race. And who knows? Adams might actually pull it off.
The HHS secretary is RFK Jr., everybody. And there is now a major legal action. That's why I bring it up to Counselor Katz. 23 states and the District of Columbia suing the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the health secretary, RFK Jr., alleging the abrupt terminations of $11 billion in public health funding. They're saying that pulling the plug on that is harmful and unlawful. They filed this suit in federal court in Rhode Island, and apparently HHS unexpectedly ended a wide array of grants supporting immunizations, infectious disease tracking, mental health, and substance abuse services. The federal government justified the cuts by claiming that the funds were, quote, no longer necessary because their limited purpose had ended along with the COVID-19 pandemic. So the result of all of this is serious harm to public health, is what's being argued by these states through their lawyers. The Biden administration originally awarded the funds to bolster pandemic response and public health infrastructure. Of course, all of that is being torn asunder by the new administration. Can you speak to this legal challenge, David Katz?
Well, these are policy decisions on some level, and I wouldn't have made those policy decisions. I think that even a lot of people who voted for Trump wouldn't have made those policy decisions. But when you challenge them legally, the questions are more like, have they followed proper procedures? So one of the major challenges will be that they haven't done it properly under the Administrative Procedure Act, which requires notices, hearings. There's a lot of rules. So they're going to argue to the court that it's been done too hastily and they haven't complied with the Administrative Procedure Act. That's not the substance of whether it's good policy or not. That's sort of, did they dot their I's and cross their T's properly? And if it's sent back so they can dot their I's and cross their T's, sometimes there's a policy change, right? And so I'm hopeful that they win on that basis. And then, cooler heads prevail, saner people with the care of our public health prevail. Now they say on the merits of it that RFK Jr.'s claim that these were all pandemic related expenses. And now that we don't have the pandemic, the money doesn't have to be spent that way anymore. I think that gets into the issues that we've talked about with the separation of powers, that once the Congress has set up a program, only Congress can kill it. All of these efforts to hamstring these agencies and to really cripple them, to imperil their existence. So many of them seem to be different from what Congress allowed. When Congress set them up, they didn't have the idea that whole offices could be closed. There's some obviously adjusting that the executive branch can do, but all of these seem to be overreaches, and that's been challenged court after court. This one in Rhode Island, the other ones, a lot of the arguments are that Congress, number one, set up these agencies, and if they're going to be dismantled in a significant way, Congress has to do it, and that Congress approved a budget. And having approved the budget, those funds have to be spent and spent in the way that Congress said. The federal government, the executive, can't impound the funds or not spend the funds as part of executing the laws. They can't say, we're going to execute the law, we're not going to do it. I mean, just common sense. That's not what executing means. So I think that that's where they are in this lawsuit. The plaintiffs are saying this money was intended to be spent, and it's not just pandemic specific. And of course, my argument to all of these things, which the Trump administration keeps losing, is that if they really believed they were right and they had the votes, they would go back to Congress. They control both houses. And they would say, you know what? I know we're dismantling AID. Give us approval, Congress. I know that we're getting rid of these programs at HHS that people say are so indispensable. Well, Congress, they aren't. They were just leftovers from the pandemic. Why don't you disapprove them? But of course, they never want to go that route. What they want to do is they want to shock and awe. They want to cripple the agency. They want to drive people out of them, have them get other jobs, give up. So this seems to be just another one. But this one is very scary, Mark, as someone who's a likely recipient. There's another pandemic.
Sure.
This one hits very close to home. I'm an older person. Thank God they did the vaccine they did the first time. Like everyone else, I was sitting at home and just praying that vaccine would come through and that it would work. And I'm praying even harder with RFK Jr. in there, cutting back, such a huge amount of HHS funds, CDC funds. They say the two people who know the most about bird flu were fired. They say the person who actually came up with that remedy that may have saved Trump's life, the person who came up with that remedy, he's been fired. So, and that was, I think, Dr. Kessler. I heard him on MSNBC last night saying that guy. Remember, Trump was really, really sick, and he took some sort of miracle drug, not the one he hawked on TV that wouldn't have worked, but one that actually worked and that he took. That one was developed by someone who Trump has now fired. Did I mention he seems like a rather ungrateful human being, Trump?
Well, this is interesting because it sounds to me like they're really applying the playbook that they've used in this instance, which is, as you say, it's that shock and awe, fire everybody, discontinue it, and fight them in the courts. And the idea somehow is the court case will go on forever. Effectively, we've won because we fired everybody. We stopped the programs. We got what we wanted. And lo que pase, pase. Whatever happens in the court, we'll just deal with that on down the way. But it'll be so far on down the way that we've really won the day. I want to ask you about the ICE agents on school campuses. There's something in California. They're going to try to pass a bill that aims to limit the presence of ICE agents on school campuses. Under the executive order from President Trump, my Lord and Savior, ICE is now allowed to target migrants at sensitive locations like schools and churches, and they can be arrested and deported from these places. So there's a new bill being sponsored by State Senator Elena Gonzalez, and it addresses some of these concerns, and it would essentially get rid of that potential. So you would have essentially those islands of safety associated with schools and churches.
I'm not so sure, Mark, how they would enforce it. But under Biden, and I think even to a large extent under Trump the first time, there were some limits on going to certain places, houses of worship. You can see why somebody would just say, even a conservative, like the first Trump administration, they would say, you know what, we're not going to go Sunday services and pull people out of church, on Sunday with their kids. Schools were another one. Schools are a particular problem because people won't send their kids to school if they're worried that they don't have anyone to pick them up, and that when they go there at 3 o'clock to pick up their kid, they're going to get arrested right in front of their kid, no less, right? So they won't send the kid to school at all because they're scared of that, and they don't have anyone else to pick them up from school. And then the state actually loses a lot of money. We're one of the states that you get so much money per attendance, per pupil that's there in the class. And so it's a big financial drain on us with people not sending their kids to school. And of course, it's a huge disaster for the kids who don't get an education. But again, if mommy or daddy is so scared that when they pick the kid up at 3, they're going to get picked up by ICE, what's the choice? To have your kid orphaned in America for practical purposes, or go to school? Well, if it's really a risk of your kid being orphaned because they deport you out of the country, and that's a whole other issue. What are these kids supposed to do? They're born here, they have that birthright citizenship, so many of them. So you've got these 6, 7, 8-year-old American citizen kids. You deport their parent. It's like, would anybody think through this situation? I want to go back to your other point for just a minute, Mark, about the shock and awe and why I keep saying it's chaotic and why it's one thing to do it in a tailored way. They could say, we're going to fire those people in 2 months. And here's the reasons why. And then they could go to court. The reason they're getting these TROs all the time, and Trump jumps up there and says, oh my God, one judge is issuing a temporary restraining order. Well, if you say you're going to do something overnight, or you do it the next day, of course you're going to invite a lot of TROs. If you do it in an orderly way, it could be litigated in an orderly way, and you could even do your appeal in an orderly way. But that's not at all. You see, this is all performative. I shouldn't say all because it has huge consequences, all performative. So when you come back to the school situation, you wonder what ICE and what, let's say, California are going to do about it. Now, of course, the state, local authorities are famous for harassing people. When they want to harass people, they go by and see who's got a broken taillight, who's went through a stop sign. I don't know. Is the sheriff in LA going to sit there and see, do these federal guys go through stop signs? Because if they sit around the schoolyard, right, and they not only don't help the feds, but they sit there and they wait for the feds to commit violations. Maybe they have a taillight missing. Maybe they go through stop signs. I mean, are they going to play hardball back? Because this really matters to the state of California. This is these kids who are growing up here. They're U.S. citizens. We want them to have an education. We want them to go to school. We don't want their parents to be so terrified that they're going to be arrested by or ensnared by ICE agents. This really matters to us. So I think the state of California and these other so-called sanctuary states, Trump wants to play hardball back. That's the way things are done in politics.
Well, at least this first legislative process may address a portion of it, but as you say, it's kind of as a practical matter, it's the Wild West. What's
the enforcement? What's the enforcement they have in mind?
Exactly. It's the enforcement, right. This quickly on from the comments, Chaplain Fred says, I'm so sorry, Mark. I'm going to disagree with Mr. Katz regarding the prisons in El Salvador. I'm a Jewish Salvadorian descent, and I can tell you that my family suffered because of the gang. So I don't think David Katz said that the gangs aren't bad. I don't know. But here he says, thank you, Chaplain Fred, for a $50 super chat. Regarding prisons in El Salvador, yes, President Bukele is harsh, but families were victims of these thugs, and where was the human where were the human rights organizations when families were being murdered? I'm a Jewish Salvadorian, and my family suffered for decades. Interesting. It sounds like Chaplain Fred is saying, I'm glad that there are these prisons to wrap up so many of these gang members who've made life in El Salvador pretty horrible for many communities. But I think what we were talking about, and please, David, I'll let you speak here in a second, but I think what we're talking about is these witheringly awful prison conditions that end up ensnaring, because of the U.S. government and who they've sent there, people who are utter innocents, who are not the gang members to whom you've referred. Go ahead, David.
Well, I appreciate that he sent in those comments so that we can, kick them around. You can do a lot of things, but with due process. Here in America, we put people in prison for very long periods of time, much longer than a lot of countries. And we keep them in prison for a lot longer, but we do it with due process. Now, people attack various aspects of the system and so forth, but we do it with due process so that we don't have mistakes. We have this philosophy, and I agree with it, that it's better that 10 guilty people get off than that one innocent person goes to jail. So imagine this person who just wrote in, who's apparently here, his family have been victimized by Venezuelan gangs. If part of that victimization was that they involuntarily put a tattoo on him, he or one of his relatives could be in that Salvadoran prison right now. We have due process in order to prevent that from happening. And when they do make a mistake, any conscientious administration anywhere in the world corrects the mistake. They don't go to the courts and say, we can't do anything, it was a mistake, but we can't cure it. They cure it so that people have confidence in the legal system, and they have confidence that the people that we give so much power to, like these enforcement officials, that they're doing the right thing, and that when they do make a mistake, they correct it. Part of Trump's thing is like, I never made a mistake, I'm always right. No one is infallible. Everyone makes mistakes. And if you own up to them, you're the bigger person. And Trump, of course, has never gone that way. His fans seem to like it, but I think the wheels are all coming off. I'm not the person to talk about tariffs. I'm sure you have guests to talk about that, but everyone's going to be paying a huge amount more money. You see Congress last night, the Senate last night had the votes, Mark. They had the votes. They got Rand Paul, who's a libertarian, to go along with them. And they said, no, these tariffs on Canada, no, we don't agree with them. Stop them right now. These tariffs on Canadian products. Now, if they got the House to go along with them, that would be the end of it. There is a check and balance on the president's executive authority. People think, oh my God, he can just stand up there and put a 50% tariff.
Yeah,
on
but the House won't even vote on it.
Well, people need to start pressuring their House members to say, look, we know very well that you agreeing to this, whatever it is, this agree. He can't do it on his own, the speaker. The speaker does it in the name of his 3 or 4 vote majority. And the swing voters there, the people who care about this issue, who are a lot of people. I mean, the Canadians are furious about this, and they have the right to be, and they're right there on the border with all these red states. So they need to tell people, like these Republican senators in North Dakota, in Idaho, all of these, I think there's one in New Hampshire, they all border Canada. They're all getting Canada totally furious at us for no reason. They've done nothing wrong. They've just been our friends. They don't rip us off. It's supposed to be about fentanyl. There's 1.5 pounds. I could have in my vest pocket right now all the fentanyl that's come into America and been seized over the last months, Mark. This is a complete farce. So they're going to pressure the House, and I think the House is going to turn around, and the House is going to vote, at least as to Canada, I think fairly soon, that no, and they're going to get rid of the tariffs on Canada, because we're really getting into a colossal collision with Canada, and the senators and the House members don't want it.
I agree with you that they don't want it, but I disagree with you that the House will vote on it. In fact, Mike Johnson has already told them all to go home. I do not believe that Johnson will allow that vote. And so in the House, I think it will die. But I agree with you that all of them think this is ridiculous. This is they know the emperor has no clothes, but no one wants to say it.
Mark,
I wanted to get
yes, Mark. Let me say one last thing on this, because it's always great when we have this back and forth. Here's the reason that I think it's realistic, because they will be able to paint the fact that they are standing by this resolution to not vote on it as a vote for it. And it'll be like Senator Collins, who's one of the senators who voted against this. She pointed out that in northern Maine, there are over 500 jobs that people are going to lose. Mainers are going to lose 500 jobs pronto, because there's a pulp factory that brings the pulp from Canada, and then it's processed a few miles across the border in Maine. Those 510 people, and there'll be 510, 550 people in North Dakota, in northern Idaho, you name it. And when they get their layoff notices or realize they're going to be laid off, okay, it's not going to be like a Rachel Maddow demonstration. It's going to be the 550 people who just lost their jobs. 500 of them voted for Trump, and they're telling their congressman up there, their Congress member, okay, you get on the ball and get rid of these Canadian tariffs, because they're killing us. So I think the Canadian ones are going to go. And also the Republican senators are getting into a good swing, 4 of them voting with all the Democrats against Trump. And it's happening, Mark. It's happening. The wheels are coming off.
Well, I do believe that there are cracks in the foundation, so I will give you that. I might be a little early to say the wheels are coming off, but you can pick your metaphor, and then maybe that is the appropriate one. But I do think
Wisconsin vote, Mark. The Wisconsin vote, Florida being so close. Come on, a little optimism. A little optimism.
You're right, and I also think that the economy, sinking like a stone, will definitely change the cast, the light in Washington, and around these votes, there may be sort of just a different conversation. But it's really tough out there to push back against this president. Now, so on the House side, I just don't know if you'll see it. That said, you're right in the sense that if there's enough real world pushback, maybe he'll allow them to cave on it. I think that the real world pushback is not something that generally moves his meter, to be honest. So I guess that's where I am on it. We will see. We'll see. I do want to, we're kind of running out of time here, but I wanted to mention that, another law firm sort of caved to Trump pressure. This is Doug Emhoff's firm. Doug Emhoff is the husband of Kamala Harris, right? Two more legal firms have reached agreements with Donald Trump to avoid executive orders that could significantly harm their businesses. The settlements come as many have expressed deep alarm at the U.S. president's effort to target law firms affiliated with his political rivals and see the actions as a thinly veiled anti-democratic effort to intimidate lawyers from taking cases hostile to the administration. One firm, Wilkie, Farr, and Gallagher, reached an agreement just this week on Tuesday with Trump, in which it agreed to commit $100 million, David Katz, in pro bono work to causes both the firm and Trump champion. Trump made this statement on Truth Social that, those who've, he triumphed. He declared this as a triumph. And then Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, joined this Wilkie, Farr, and Gallagher in January. Had told the firm it should not settle with Trump, according to published reports. But the firm also helped represent two Georgia election workers, Ruby Freeman and Shane Moss, who successfully sued Rudy Giuliani for more than $148 million. So you see, David Katz, in these specifics, how this is a political jihad that Donald Trump is on. And these firms cave. They just don't want to be on the wrong side of this guy. $100 million in pro bono work?
Well, this has gotten a huge amount of attention, of course, in the legal community, and then just more generally, because we haven't seen anything like this. This is truly unprecedented. And if you just have a couple more minutes, I think Emhoff will probably go to another firm. He's got a book of business, and he's got obviously a big name. He's second gentleman. Kamala Harris might be the governor. Who knows? She might run next time. She might be the president. So he'll have a lot of entree to a lot of firms. I think he has to make a statement with Wilkie Farr and Gallagher agreeing to do this, that he doesn't want to be a part of that firm. He'll take his book of business somewhere else. Someone has commented that the firms who are basically corporate and that do deals are the ones who have made these accommodations with Trump. So it's not that surprising. Wilkie Farr and Gallagher was a famous Wall Street firm that did a lot of deals, more so than they were known for litigation. That's probably also true of the other ones who made deals. Skadden Arps was a famous merger and acquisitions firm, and the money that they make on that is probably a lot greater than what they make on what you and I think of as litigation. And then Jenner and Block, Wilmer Hale, the ones who are actually fighting and litigating, people said, well, yeah, that's what they do more of. They're more fighters and litigators than they are deal makers. And, it's been done to intimidate law firms. It's been done so that law firms won't take on cases that Trump doesn't like. That's all true. But they're businesses. They're huge businesses. All the firms that we're talking about have over 1,000 lawyers. Some of them have 2,000 lawyers. They have even more thousands of support staff. The partners tend to make $5 million a year or so. Now, people say, you know what? They should be willing to make $3 million a year for the couple of years that Trump is in there. Even if that's what it ends up costing, Mark, let him make $3 million a year and not $5 million a year. And guess what? They decided in our capitalist system, and they're capitalists with law degrees, that they would rather make $5 or $6 million next year and not 3 or 4. And so it was to their benefit to settle. When you think of a law firm with 1,500 lawyers and what they bill, $100 million is not that big a deal. And to be absolutely honest with you, number one, they're going to have a pro bono program that costs them some money. So some of that money is they're going to spend anyway. They're going to shift that over. If they were spending 30 million right now, they're going to count that 30 million toward the 100 million. And the other 70 million, the partner's going to charge $1,000 an hour. They're going to be 3 associates on every pro bono case. They're going to be charging $500 an hour. Before you know it, the 70 million left, Mark, it's gone before you know it. And these causes that they're going to be working on, they say they're going to help veterans. If Trump wants to help veterans, we don't need pro bono work done by Wilkie Farr and Gallagher. What we need is that he not cut back the VA.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of straightforward. Kim asked a question about this off the air, and I thought I'd just throw it to you. She said, couldn't these law firms that have, capitulated, have surrendered to Trump in this way, the $100 million worth of pro bono, you also saw the $40 million, another firm, et cetera, pro bono, couldn't they just dog it on the legal work and not really work that hard and kind of, phone it in? Kim was wondering, isn't there a way, kind of a workaround in the moment? So you say you're going to help, you say you're going to represent for all these things, but the reality is you don't really do much in any kind of earnest way.
The thing about lawyers, they're very smart, they're very punctilious, and they do what they say they're going to do. The bills are going to be accurate. Now, did they really need to bring 4 associates along with a partner to the meeting? That's what clients complain about in the real world, that the bill is not made up, but it's padded in that sort of way, or there's unnecessary research or unnecessary time that's spent on cases. I've been doing this for 35 years, Mark, so I know a lot of issues. I don't look up, exceptions to the Fourth Amendment. And charge like 3 hours of time to look up exceptions to the Fourth Amendment. I charge 5 minutes for that and you get experienced lawyers. That's what's so wrong with this system, Mark. If you give me one more minute, I talked about this, that I was in Washington, D.C. when Carter went out of office and Reagan came in. And I was at the biggest Democratic law firm after I was a law clerk to a judge. I went to work for the biggest Democratic law firm in town, which was called Arnold and Porter. And we had a wonderful business, and nobody said, oh, you're known as a Democratic law firm. We, the Reagan administration, are in power. We never ran into that because we got cases that we knew all about. We represented Puerto Rico. We'd represented Puerto Rico for, decades. We knew everything about Puerto Rico and what their problems were. Nobody said, wait, let's go find another lawyer who's going to get up to speed about Puerto Rico and all of its problems. Arnold and Porter knew everything about Puerto Rico. We knew everything about the cigarette industry. And so it was like, I'm sure somebody else would have loved to have had, R.J. Reynolds' business. But guess what? We had it, and they weren't going to send it to some Republican firm. And I think that right now, that's really the situation. There's so many experts who know so much about mergers and acquisitions. They know so much about this. And so in that sense, Mark, and I don't want to say it's being overemphasized. It's a big deal if they pick your firm. But I just, this idea of like profiles and cowardice and all these things that they've said about Paul Weiss and stuff like that. Paul Weiss made a business decision. It reminds me a little bit of like Amazon and the Washington Post, Bezos and the Washington Post. The guy made a business decision. He just did, and it's sort of predictable. And these law firms, when they take on these controversial cases, I'm sure they thought about it. Like when they took on this case for the two ladies against Giuliani. Number one, I think they got a big fee, although I don't know how much they really collected from Giuliani. They got a lot of publicity. And yeah, it's kind of,
it was the right side of that issue to be on.
Absolutely the right side. And the world isn't going away in 2 or 3 years, and Wilkie Farn Gallagher will be remembered forever for this decision. Paul Weiss will be remembered forever for this decision. They hold themselves up as this great trailblazer in civil rights. They don't look like such a trailblazer in civil rights now, do they? With agreeing to $40 million in pro bono for causes that they share with Donald Trump. So they took an institutional hit. But Mark, this is my last thought on this. All these law firms are the victims. The perpetrator, right, is Trump. The perpetrator is this thing, and they've had this unleashed against them. And these law firms, none of these law firms deserve it. And they're all chosen because they did some controversial case that Trump didn't like. And the guy is just not big enough to say, this is what Reagan would have said. Reagan would have said, you fight your side of it, other side fights their side of it, we'll have a clash. That's why when people say Trump is like Reagan, at least from my recollection of Reagan, no, he's really not. That you got to be bigger than that. And I think everyone that we've had in office, even even some of the ones I disagree with, I think they were all bigger than this. They all got the fact that we'll get him next time. Trump doesn't have that. He never, it's just like he tried to steal the election and had the coup on January 6th. He's never had that attitude, which is so American, which is, we had a good fight and I'm going to get you next time.
No, he doesn't have that move. You're right. This from LJ. LJ says, Katz is the best guest on the Mark Thompson Show. He's not only very substantive, he's very engaging and entertaining. I agree. I love my David Katz. That's where we go long.
You have guests who won the Pulitzer Prize and who are nationally famous, so that's very nice of them to say.
Yeah, you're in good company, but apparently for LJ...
I'm in my lane, but they're in some great lanes for other guests.
For LJ, you're a fave. David, appreciate so much your time and your thoughts, and I look forward to next week. Thanks for joining us today.
Kim and I rocked last Monday, Mark.
I know. I saw it. It was a special appearance. I liked it. I liked it a lot. She put up the bat beam and you responded.
We taped it at 11 p.m. the night before. And if anybody wants to look it up, I guessed the Wisconsin result. I'm taking some credit for that.
Oh, good boy. Very well done.
Musk said it was going to be 50-50. Musk said it was going to be so close you won't even believe it. And then, of course, Musk got involved. And so either his prediction was not good or he himself swung the votes 10 points against his side.
Yeah, he's not exactly the right.
10 points against his side.
There is Katzadamus, the artist conception of Katzadamus as the sage that David Katz is. He correctly predicted the outcome of the Wisconsin election. And you're right. A lot of people were talking about the Wisconsin election for the Supreme Court in Wisconsin, but not a lot of predictions. You went out there. I give you a lot of credit.
And I was without my cheese head. I have a cheese head at home, but they don't last forever. You don't want to put on a 10-year-old cheese head.
That is true. All right, David, thank you. We'll see you next time.
Great
Dave Katz, everybody. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Everyone, I must tell you, first of all, thank you, everybody who threw in super stickers and super chats on this day and who has joined us and thrown us a thumbs up. Smash it if you haven't yet.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Thumbs up. I appreciate it. It helps us in the YouTube universe. It costs you nothing. And Hula Steph says, thanks to the entire MTS crew for keeping us sane in this tough time. I'm a quiet OG too. Well, big shout out to you, Hula Steph, and
big shout out.
Appreciate your support and your nice words. Hi, Mark. Great show, says Vicky in Sausalito. Thank you for a $20 super chat. Wow, Vicky, thank you.
Big shout out.
Albert and I are soldiering on without Kim. So, yeah, Kim is not here, and so we're having to...
I blame you.
Okay, all right, Kim. With Our Eyes Rise sends in a super chat. It's about TYT. Hi, Mark. Hi, Mark. Did you see our global peace campaign at Green Lover's Dream? Green Lover's Dream is supposed to be Jenk's studio iPad name. I didn't know that. I'm over at TYT occasionally, but I wasn't aware of Jenk's studio iPad name controversy. We paid $5,000 to name it in TYT's 2018 Amplify campaign. No word from Jenk. Wow. I'm going to have Jenk on, and on the day that Jenk comes on, I want you, with our eyes rise, to recall this for us, and I will ask him about it. Okay, I promise. I love the idea of auctioning a name off or something to raise money for the show. It's a really good idea. Well, I have to take a meeting on that. And then this from Depressed Canadian, a $20 super chat. Hey, Mark, a fun distraction from politics is Red Letter Media reviewed Shadoe Stevens' 80 movie Tracks. Oh, he was in that 80s movie. Yeah, it was done in the 80s called Tracks. It includes a brief chat with Stevens himself about the film. It is a really funny look at 80s B-movie filmmaking. Yet interesting. Thank you. Red Letter Media reviewing Shadoe Stevens' 80s movie Tracks. I know that somebody who's a friend of the show, Josh Robert Thompson, has Tracks on VHS, and I think Shadoe autographed it for him. But I will follow up with Shadoe on that. And more to the point, I'm going to look at that Red Letter Media reviewing Shadoe's performance in that 80s movie. I hope they say something complimentary. So, Albert, on the way out, I need to check on
Mark's Madness.
Yes.
I can't believe it.
What is the latest commish on the drops that have gone up against each other on this day after Liberation Day?
Yeah, so obviously the first hour wasn't as it was very close, but the second hour not so much. Let me show you here.
Here are the results, everyone. So far, again, the voting is till midnight tonight.
Yeah, try ignoring it is taking it over Oprah conversation right now.
Wow, try ignoring it.
We could try ignoring it, sir.
It is 79% of the vote so far. And Oprah's...
Who is having that conversation?
She's only got 21% of the vote. Yeah. So that's the walkover. And meanwhile, on the other side of Mark's Madness, there is a Sweet 16 showdown going on. And it is between...
Put that coffee down.
Put that coffee down, with 45% of the vote against going back to Texas.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
Oh, man, that leads. It looks like that may win 55 to 45. It's close, and there's a lot of hours before midnight. Things could change, but wow.
Put that coffee down.
Yeah, put that coffee down may go down to going back to Texas. You can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
It's tough not to love that lady. Oprah is cooked, says True Tech. Oh, don't say it that way. My Oprah. She may be seeing the end.
Who is having that conversation?
Yeah. Josh Robert Thompson is on the panel for Red Letter Media during this episode. Oh, it's great how it all comes together. Thank you, Depressed Canadian. I'll ask him. I've got to get JRT on this show. I'm supposed to see him, I think, this week, actually. Yeah, so this week or next week. It is, now I'm reading the chat. Sorry, I'm distracted. Hey, thanks everybody for joining us. Tomorrow, we have a special visit from our doctor. Yeah, Dr. Michael Dania will be here tomorrow. Vital Signs, his segment, will kick off the show tomorrow. We'll also dive in a bit deeper on these tariffs and the future. That, Michael Shore, and more. And now
I'm
Shadoe
Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Shadoe. Thank you, everyone.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Albert. Until tomorrow, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.